So they have a form of universal income, a basic income, UBI. It's about $33,000 to $60,000 a year, depending on how you do your counting, far higher than the UBIs which are being proposed for the United States, which are about $10,000 a year. AI will very soon be able to do all human work better and faster than all humans, and in combination with robotic automatons. There was a suggestion by a Kuwaiti influencer just to take all the migrants and send them out in the desert to die, because they were considered, because most of them live in such difficult conditions where where you have many people to a room, densely populated, where they become vectors of disease. They said, let's just get rid of them.
Welcome to Author Talks. With me is Bryn Barnard.
Watch our YouTube channel, have seen it. He's already done a fascinating talk on Malaysia, not only Malaysia, on the glorious heritage of Islamic culture. Today, we are moving on to a slightly more prosaic topic, or perhaps a more metaphoric topic. Minneapolis in the desert, Kuwait, AI, and the future of work. Welcome, Bryn.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for making the time. So, Bryn, both Kuwait and Minneapolis, or Minnesota rather, have generous welfare systems. Both have uncovered systemic fraud. In Kuwait, the focus is on citizens who have dual nationality. In Minnesota, of course, it is Somali immigrants who are the focus. Tell us more about why are you comparing Minnesota, or rather Minneapolis and Kuwait, and give us a bit more color as to why you framed our discussion in the way you did.
Well, you gave me a good setup there, as far as the what's going on in both places, where there's a focus on fraud and a focus on denaturalization. And of course, the Minneapolis case is part of a bigger Trump administration campaign to remove immigrants from the country. And we've seen this in Chicago, and we've seen it in other blue states, Los Angeles, and it's ongoing. But so far, it's been almost entirely focused on removing immigrants from the country. In Kuwait, the campaign is a little more radical in that it's denaturalizing citizens. And this is something that the Trump administration has discussed as kind of like the next step. Trump has made some passing remarks that he's interested in doing that. But if you look at Project 2025, that's clearly one of the next step is to look at all natural. I think they're planning on looking at all naturalizations going back to 1965, and which coincidentally is the same date that Kuwait is looking at, 1965, but for different reasons. So I thought it would be interesting because since both Kuwait and Minnesota have these generous welfare states, and since both have this, they're both undergoing this kind of scrutiny for removing parts of the population, but for different reasons. It might make an interesting comparison. It's not a perfect comparison. I also wanted to just talk about the Kuwait as a model for the kind of UBI based automated future, which is promised us under AI. So that's basically it. So in Kuwait, I'll just give you sort of an overview. You have it's obviously quite different than the United States. You have a large number of citizens, about 1.5 million people, who have rights, and you have an even larger number of migrant workers who are only there to be able to work, and they have limited rights. And then you have a third group of people who are stateless. And they would be sort of the equivalent of undocumented migrants here. And what's being added to that now is a fourth class of people as they go through and they take away rights from people. A fourth class of stateless. They're stateless and have no ability to. They have no ability to get work. They have no ability to leave the country. They have they effectively don't exist legally. So that's a little bit of the difference here. We don't exactly know what's going to happen in the United States when we start if a large scale denaturalization campaign happens. What's going to happen to the people that are denaturalized? Are they going to become this stateless population floating around the U.S.? Where are they going to be sent if they don't have? What happens to them if they don't have passports and can't go anywhere? So.
All right, we will get to all those things perhaps later. For now, let's talk about AI. Give us an overview.
All right.
And talk us through the various predictions that ordain AI will be replacing all human jobs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so if you watched the 2026 Davos Summit, Yuval Noah Harari was there, and he pointed out that AI, it's not a tool like a knife that can be used to cut up lettuce for salad or perpetrate murder, but an agent that can come up with uses for knives that we've never thought of, and invents new knives that we can't imagine. So he predicted that AI will very soon be able to do all human work better and faster than all humans, and in combination with robotic automatons.
Including cutting tomatoes with knives.
Yeah. Yeah, including cutting tomatoes with knives, yeah. And in combination with robotic automatons, so there's a difference between cognitive labor and manual labor. So in combination with robotic automatons, make us economically redundant, making humans economically redundant. So AI, he predicts, is going to get human status the way that corporations do. We already have some rivers like the Wanganui in New Zealand, or the Magpie in Canada, or the Arato in Colombia that have legal status. And then in India, Indian gods have been given legal status, like Lord Ram, Shiva, and Ganesha. Like actual humans, they'll be able to own property, open bank accounts, institute lawsuits, proselytize, date, marry, and possibly vote.
I mean, who gives? How can he say that they'll be given the right to vote? Really?
Well,
isn't that a stretch? I mean, Yuval is a brilliant man, but I mean, sometimes he over-eggs it a wee bit.
Well, if you look right now, for example, look at like what's going on with Moltbook. This is very early days. I'm sure you've heard of that. It's this new AI social network where humans aren't allowed, and the AI agents go in and do a lot of the work that people would normally do. Theoretically, you could send out AI agents to do your voting for you, and in the case of for example, rivers that have legal status, they have representatives that do their their voting for them. So that might be what it is. That you'd have a human representative doing it for you, or or you just change the nature of you change the nature of voting, so that if a cognitively sentient AI is capable of if it actually is sentient, if we've reached AGI, or that's automated general intelligence, if it's actually able to do the kinds of thinking that humans can do, and it has legal status, I suppose you could argue that why not? Because
Well, I'm not convinced it would take major constitutional change. But let's move on. Let's not get stuck on this point. But
okay.
let's move on.
He's talking in broad, broad. He's painting a future of possibilities, not because they're going to happen, but to be aware that they might happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then the counters. Okay, so Gary Marcus, who's a critic of our current large language model, artificial intelligence, LLM AI, which is the big focus. He says that's fundamentally flawed. He's not the only one, but he's written about this at
length.
Ad nauseum.
At length and ad nauseum.
About the hallucination problem, which is that they AIs, the LLM AIs, they lie. We say hallucinate, but they lie. And it's insoluble no matter how much we scale. That's no matter how big you make the data centers, it doesn't go away. And Gary Marcus is a proponent of other forms of artificial intelligence, which he thinks could solve the problem. But he thinks the current fascination with LLMs is eventually going to collapse. And Ed Zitron, he's another critic. He says that the AIs, LLM AIs, are financially flawed because of the cost of the data centers, and the electricity is more. The more we use, the more the AI companies lose. So only 15% of those who use AI report any increase in profits. So if I do my homework on using ChatGPT loses money. If I write an annual report, they lose more money. And finally, there's the critique that now that AI has hoovered up all human information, they have to be trained on synthetic data, including the AI slop that's being created. And the more of this that they're trained on, the more unstable they become, and eventually you get something called machine autophagy disorder, or MAD, and they collapse. So with our current trajectory, there's no worries about having artificial generative intelligence reaching a singularity and becoming sentient, say the critics, because of these fundamental flaws in the. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. It may mean that this current direction that we're going may stop, and we may try other approaches, which are still going on. But they just haven't received the kind of money and funding that.
So let's assume that AI does replace a lot of jobs. Let's say all these junior lawyers, they are not needed anymore. All these junior coders, they are definitely not needed. Claude is doing a lot of coding for my friends in Silicon Valley. So once that happens, and you have human beings who are redundant, do we give them universal basic income, or do we ship them off to the Sahara to die in the sun? Or we are more merciful, and we find out human ways of culling the herd, as someone would say.
Well, it's interesting that you talked about shipping them off to the Sahara and dying in the sun. As I pointed out, in Kuwait, they have this big number of migrant workers. They call them expats there, who do all the cognitive and manual labor.
Nothing unique about that in Kuwait. All the Gulfies do the same.
Yes, that's true in the entire Gulf.
The entire Persian Gulf. It's the expats who do all the jobs. The Bangladeshi workers die till they're exhausted to build Qatari stadiums or stadia, and all the accounting is done perhaps by Indians, Pakistanis, and the senior management is European. And Qatari money then flows into Paris to own Paris Saint-Germain, the football
Yeah.
club.
And then you also have big vanity projects going in, like the Louvre,
Saudi
the
Arabia.
Guggenheim in the Gulf. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and then Saudi Arabia with Neom, the big 100-mile long city, and so on. But during COVID, there was a suggestion by a Kuwaiti influencer just to take all the migrants and send them out in the desert to die, because they were considered, because most of them live in such difficult conditions where where you have many people to a room, densely populated, where they become vectors of disease. They said, let's just get rid of them. And this got a lot of attention and a lot of criticism.
Was this a serious suggestion? It wasn't said in jest, I believe.
No, it wasn't said in jest. It was.
It wasn't like me making a wry, ironic remark.
No. This was an influencer who suggested it, I think, with seriousness,
with all earnestness.
Yeah, with earnestness. Yeah. But in any case.
He was doing it from the
was a she, actually.
She was doing it from the goodness of her heart. She does not want disease to spread. She is humane. She does not want workers to suffer in cramped conditions. Perhaps the desert might be good, as far as she's concerned.
I think the thinking really was more that she didn't. There's a problem when you have when you have sort of this migrant worker population that are sort of thought of as cogs in a machine, and are thought as replaceable cogs in a machine. And one of them dies building your stadia, you just bring in another one. That if sending them all out in the desert to die is it's kind of thought of as less than human. That's a real problem. If you look at Kuwait has a very robust press, and Kuwait of all the countries in the Gulf is a democracy. It's a constitutional monarchy, and they have a very robust press, and they do a lot of investigative journalism. And you read lurid stories almost weekly about mistreatment of expats. They're thrown out of windows. They're run over in the desert. They're locked in closets. Now, of course, that's not everybody. This is a press that thrives on sort of yellow journalism, but it seems like to such an extent that at one point the Philippine embassy was going to stop giving any kind of work permits to Filipinos to work in Kuwait because the treatment was so bad, and there had to be changes in what's called the
Philippine embassy, or was it the Kuwait embassy in Philippines?
This is the Kuwait embassy in the Philippines. Was the Filipino government?
The Philippine government
was saying that
we are not going to let you go if you have a visa to Kuwait.
Yeah, we're just not going to let you work there. And so there were changes that were made to the kafala system, and that's the system that was developed in Kuwait and then adopted throughout the rest of the Gulf, where your work is tied to a specific employer who holds your passport and has immense power over you, and you can't leave the country until your passport is returned. And so this and because of this power, that's what's kind of led to the abuse. And so I'm told it's pretty much like bonded labor. That's a good comparison. It's not a perfect comparison, but it is. The employer pays a lot of money to get this employee there, and if the employee wants to change jobs or leave the country, they have to come up with the money to do it. So in my case, I was a teacher at an international school, and we were in an unusually privileged position in that we were able to keep our passports. So we could come and go as we pleased. But one of our teachers left the school and went to get a job at the Kuwaiti government in the education department, and in that case, he had to turn over his passport to that was a difference. This was just sort of a special carve out that was made for us. But let's talk about back to your original question: universal basic income. So. So Kuwait is not Kuwait basically has something like that, but I'll get to that in a minute. But there are many places that are trying this out. It's being suggested at if all work is automated, what are we going to do with the humans? So Namibia, they have a universal basic income grant. It's called BIG. It's resulted in a significant reduction in poverty, crime, malnutrition, as well as an increase in income generating activities and school attendance. Alaska, they have 1% of Alaskans have been reported to work less under the state's permanent fund dividend. This comes from oil. They have the Alaska Pipeline, they have the North Slope, and it only covers basic necessities. So few people are making enough money with their permanent fund dividends, called the PFD, to stop working. When jobs are available, people continue to work and strive for more in order to maintain or improve their lifestyle. If you go to Oman, they have a sort of universal basic income, which is similar to Alaska. It comes from their gas fields. It doesn't. It provides sort of a net under which people work, but you still have Omani taxi drivers, Omani school teachers, Omani construction workers. They're still doing the work. They're not importing labor to the extent that they are in the Gulf. So the Cato Institute thinks that which is a libertarian think tank, thinks that UBI should replace federal and state assistance programs in the United States as a way to reduce federal spending. They say that all our federal spending now is unsustainable and distorts the market. So their version of UBI would replace all current American entitlements. That means our temporary assistance to needy families, which is called the TANF, the supplementary nutrition assistance programs, SNAP, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, disability insurance, energy assistance, housing subsidies. This would result in a huge decrease in the bureaucracy, government outflows, and paternalism. Cato also wants UBI to be implemented along with a repeal of all minimum wage laws, rent control, anti-price gouging laws. So that really the poor under this system would be no better off than they are today. They'd just be poor in a different way. If a UBI recipient took their monthly stipend and blew it on the lottery tickets or the casino, had a medical emergency or other automobile repair or household disaster that exceeded the UPI, there'd be no safety net. So too bad for you. So Singapore doesn't have it. I'm sorry.
Sorry, my apologies. In Cato's defense, and I go to Cato Institute quite a bit, they have some excellent events, and often they make points that are valid. For instance, they talk about curbing the power of the government, the federal government and the state government. They talk about having improved rule of law, better procedures in court. And in Cato's defense, they say that with debt rising to nearly 39 trillion, it is clear that at some point there won't be appetite for American bonds. There isn't enough money in the world to soak up American debt. What does the US Treasury do then? So some painful decisions are needed now rather than later. So in Cato's defense, they are not being mala fide and wanting to increase suffering. They are thinking in terms of long-term fiscal stability of the US.
Of course, yeah. No, I understand that. It would be a big change from today, where you have
a lot of people would inevitably suffer.
Yeah, and I wanted to compare this to Singapore, which is often pointed to by conservatives as a good financial model for us to look at. So
my brother lives in Singapore.
Okay. So then you're probably familiar with the Central Provident Fund. So it's a mandatory social savings system designed to fund retirement, housing, and healthcare for Singaporean citizens. This does not apply to foreigners. I worked in Singapore for 4 years, so it didn't apply to me. But 20% of all earnings, which is matched up to 17% by employers, are put away for your work life. As initially designed in 1955, citizens could take out their accumulated savings, like as a lump sum, and spend them as they pleased. In those days, life expectancy was 59 to 61, so this really wasn't a problem. There's little danger that someone was going to run out of money if you were going to die 4 years after you got your savings. But now, Singapore's lifespan is much longer.
Isn't it now almost 80 or even over 80?
Oh, no, it's over that. Yeah, it's over that. So now it's 83 to 85 years.
They have excellent healthcare. They have excellent systems.
Oh yeah, it's one of the best healthcare systems in the world, which I also experienced. So there were isolated cases in the old days of retirees making bad bets on investments or getting scammed out of their life savings. One of the things I noticed living in Singapore is that Singaporeans get scammed out of around $400 million annually, US dollars annually.
Wow.
But as life expectancies rose, that old system became untenable. And so in 1987, the system was changed so that Singaporeans could only take out a monthly maximum from that money that they had saved and had been matched by their employers. Inflation, which was not something that was really taken into sufficient account under either the old or the new system, has made it increasingly problematic, forcing even the very elderly to continue working. So in 2025, Singaporean life expectancy, like I said, is 83 to 85 years. And the Uber drivers that I had and the classroom cleaning staff that I had were almost all old Singaporean men and women in their 70s and 80s, one of whom, Mr. Wong, dropped dead in my classroom. I had an Uber driver once who I would always ask them, how do you like driving for Uber or for Grab, which is the version that they have there. And he said, well, I just got out of open heart surgery. And I said, well, how come? And he said, well, I'm I've used up all of my MediSave, which is the portion of your employee provident fund, central provident fund that's put away for your medical care, and it's all gone. So I have to do this to pay back my open heart surgery. So that's a flaw in the Singaporean system that you could see happening. What happens in if we have UBI and the sort of the costs that have been how much it's going to cost to fund all the human beings is either insufficient or for various unforeseen reasons goes up. Then what do you do? And so are the machines, if they're running everything, are they going to say, we'll give you more, or do we make you less? Is one obvious solution to have less humans so that we can that's one way to solve the problem, and that's one of the things that's been happening in Kuwait. And like I said, has been talked about under the Project 2020 model in the U.S. If you continue with our current paternalistic model, one of the things you can do is you can reduce the number of citizens who can access it. That would be one way of reducing spending, would be to denaturalize a lot of citizens, or even citizens who were born in the United States, and when they get to Social Security age or Medicare age, there's just fewer of them to get those benefits. So let's look at the Minnesota's welfare state model.
Indeed. That brings us nicely on from Kuwait to Minnesota, because we are talking of different welfare models. We've touched upon Kuwait, we've touched upon Singapore, or we've touched upon Cato's idea of a universal basic income, and now the stage is set for Minnesota and Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, yes. So
just so that our viewers around the world know, Minnesota is a state within the United States, one of the 50 states, and Minneapolis is the capital of Minnesota.
And one of the twin cities, which is Minneapolis, St. Paul.
St. Paul. And it's a state which is in the Midwest. It gets bitterly cold in winter, has lovely lakes, was settled largely by Swedish immigrants in the 19th century, some Germans too. It's a Lutheran state, and it's a state which has, in many ways, adopted the European social model, including a decent welfare state.
Yes, yeah. It's often the welfare state there is often compared to the Scandinavian welfare state. So compared to the other states around it, it's much more generous.
Indeed, and
as far as the benefits you can get.
And the phrase Minnesota or Minnesota nice is rather well known in the US. People from Minnesota tend to be nicer, apparently, than other Americans. So goes the rumor, so goes the fable.
Well, they're very polite. In the way that Canadians are very polite. Yeah. So it's high spending, it's progressive, and it's designed for broad support of the entire population. It has comprehensive social services, high investment in spending, an expansionary focus, meaning that it's constantly growing, broad eligibility, meaning it's one of the most generous in the U.S. about who's eligible to get access to this. And it has a policy focus on poverty reduction, not just temporary assistance. So unlike other states where we'll give you temporary assistance to get you back on your feet, and then you're back on your own. They're trying to come up with permanent poverty reduction. So nearly half of all Minnesota state funds go to health and human services. The critics have pointed out that it has really not necessarily led to better outcomes. And it does not have sufficient oversight, which has led to the vulnerability, which was shown up with this the fraud scandal. And this was an organization, well, the most famous one of which is called, or notorious one, is called Feed Our Future. 45-year-old Amy Brock, she's a white woman. She was the mastermind of this. This was during COVID. It was a federally funded program, Feed Our Future. So federal funds went through Minnesota. It was designed to feed hungry children. About $250 million were spent. Prosecutors have charged 70 people, all of whom, except for Amy Brock, are either Somali or East African. Perpetrators have been accused of using the stolen money not to feed children, but to purchase residential and commercial real estate, luxury goods, vehicles, planes, international flights, and other luxury expenses.
And they are behaving like good old Somali warlords. That's what Somali warlords do. They don't feed other Somalis. They buy good stuff.
Well, and this is problematic because in Minnesota, 1 out of 5 healthcare workers is Somali. So this has made them a real target.
Yeah.
So Somali American Mohammed Abu Rashid Amahid has been accused of fraudulently charging Medicaid. This is another service, Guardian Home Healthcare Services, with $3 million in home healthcare services that were never provided. Several other countries have been similarly charged.
It's much less than $250 million that Amy Bock is.
Yeah, it's much less. Yeah. So
10%, a little more than 10%.
Yeah. So the fraud is provided an excuse for the Trump
administration. 1%. I stand corrected. 1%.
Yeah. 1%. Yeah. It's much smaller. Yeah. The $250 million is the biggest. The biggest. But this is an excuse for the Trump administration to paint with a broad brush all Somali Americans. So round them up, imprison them, and kick them out of the country is sort of what Operation Metro Surge has been about, as part of its campaign to rid the country of undocumented migrants, even legal migrants and U.S. citizens who come from nations that Trump has identified as, he puts it, shithole countries. The operation, this has led to widespread citizen protest and the killing of two American citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, by federal agents. And so far, it's really a standoff. So
just to stop you there, it is also true that there has been a lot of fraud in the Somali community. That is what many Somalis have acknowledged themselves.
Yes.
Because they did not come from a society which was high trust. They did not come from a society with a functioning state.
Correct.
And many of them did not make the transition to Minnesota on ice. And they thought this was free money. They brought with them the culture of corruption, grab what you can here and now.
Which can be dealt with in the courts, which Minnesota was dealing with in the courts.
Indeed.
So this is not a what Operation Metro Surge really has been using this as an excuse, as a laboratory to see what happens if they go in and grab people, move them out, and what kind of response they'll get. So this is fine. This is, I think, fine tuning ICE for other operations in other blue states. I'm speculating here.
So what you're saying is they are really wanting to do what Kuwait or one influencer in Kuwait wanted to, and send them out to the sun.
Exactly. Well, actually, it's actually what they want to do is what Kuwait is doing, and so now we can get we'll get back.
Let's educate us. Yeah, educate us about what Kuwait is doing.
So Kuwait is a rentier.
By the way, the country that in 1990/1991 George Bush Sr. saved from Iraq. We should not forget that. That is the first Gulf War. That is when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and that is when American forces, supported by allies, liberated Kuwait. Correct.
So so Kuwait it's a small country at the head of the Persian Gulf. As I said before, it's the Gulf's only democracy. It's a constitutional monarchy with an emir as the head of state and a national assembly that is democratically elected. The emir can dissolve the assembly, and there's supposed to be elections within 60 days. Sometimes the emir will suspend the constitution so that those dissolutions can last even longer. The longest thus far since Kuwait became independent in 1960 has been 4 years. The National Assembly can vote on legislation. And they have they can make it impossible or possible for legislation to move forward, and that's really Kuwait's problem. So one of Kuwait's problems. So
you mentioned it's complete logjam, legislative logjam. Nothing can get done on the floor of the legislature, which means much needed laws are never passed.
Yeah. So it's similar. It's actually very similar to our own American Congress, in that you have almost 50-50 split between conservatives and liberals. And I'll explain who those are in a minute. So then they have a form of universal income, a basic income (UBI). It's about $33,000 to $60,000 a year, depending on how you do your counting. Far higher than the UBIs which are being proposed for the United States, which are about $10,000 a year. So there's a policy analyst.
So Kuwait has how much? Repeat, please.
Between $33,000 and $60,000 a year.
A year. Wow.
So this is, depending on how you want to do your calculating, free healthcare, free education, guaranteed job in the government, you free land if you want to build a house, subsidies when you have children. So depending on how you're doing the counting, it's anywhere between 33 and 60.
Bryn, you're giving ideas to enterprising young Americans. They may all want to marry Kuwaitis now.
Probably not. I'll explain why. So policy analyst Selma Khalil has suggested that Kuwait is a model for how an automated society with the UBI might work. Since the migrants do almost all the economic labor, there's about 3.5 million migrants, 1.5 million Kuwaitis. And the Kuwaitis, almost all, about between 70 and 80%, work in the government sector, where they have government sinecures. They are guaranteed. They're very, very difficult to fire anybody except for really extraordinary malfeasance. And promotion is not based on cleverness or on innovation, but on
hard work.
Or hard work. So all Kuwait nationals have access to those great benefits. This employment scheme where expat migrants dominate the private sector and nationals work in the government started when Kuwait was a newly developing country, and few citizens had skills to build the nation. This was a nation of fishermen and pearl divers and camel herders, and they really did not have the skills to build this brand new nation. So about the time that Kuwait discovered oil and started commercially exploiting it was about the time of the Nakba in Palestine. So initially,
so this is 1948. You're talking
1948, about yeah,
the formation of the state of Israel,
right? And this huge expulsion of Palestinians from Palestine, and they went to many countries, and ultimately about 400,000. Were invited and settled in Kuwait, and they became the laborers, they became the teachers, they became the technocrats. One of my Kuwaiti friends who grew up during that period, the teacher who was Palestinian, asked the students, "How many of you are Kuwaiti?" And he was the only person in the class who raised their hand. All the other students were Palestinian. So that was so they really built the country, built the infrastructure of the country, the roads, the desalinization plants, the port, all the things that were the beginnings of the modern Kuwaiti state. This ended. You mentioned the first Gulf War. This ended during the Gulf War because Yasser Arafat, who started Fatah, the leading party of the Palestinian Liberation Organization in Kuwait, supported Saddam Hussein. He was very skeptical.
So hold fire. He didn't start it in Kuwait. Fatah began elsewhere, I believe.
No, he founded it. No, he founded it in Kuwait.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he was living in Kuwait, and yeah, he founded it there.
Yeah. Okay. I learned something. I'd forgotten that. I'm sure I read it a while ago, but I had blanked on that. Wow.
So in any case, some of the major players in the early Palestinian Liberation Organization, they met in Kuwait. So this was a big part of building the Palestinian identity. Was there in Kuwait.
So in 1990, 1991, Yasser Arafat made a bad bet. The Palestinians supported Saddam Hussein because Saddam Hussein had supported the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Fatah. They were part of the same socialist tradition in the Arab world. And
more importantly, Saddam said, "After I've liberated Kuwait, as I'm doing now, I'm going to liberate Palestine." So the Yasser Arafat was the only member of the Arab League who did not vote in favor of the United States coming in to liberate Kuwait. He said, "Once the Americans are there, they'll never leave." Before this, Britain had been the preeminent foreign power in the Gulf, and in this prediction, he was correct, because once the Americans came in, they did not leave. Kuwait had just a huge number of bases. They've now been winnowed down to about 6. Kuwait is now one of America's most important allies in the Gulf. It's an unsinkable aircraft carrier for the projection of American power into the Gulf.
So is Qatar, so is Bahrain.
Correct. Correct. But Kuwait is unique, unlike those other countries, in that it has borders with Iraq.
Yes, Kuwait is on the Iraq side of the Persian Gulf, whilst Qatar and Bahrain are on the Arabian Peninsula side of the Persian Gulf.
with
They
Saudi
border Saudi
Arabia.
Arabia basically.
Correct. Yeah, Kuwait borders both Iraq and Saudi Arabia, and it has a maritime border with Iran. So because of that, because of this support for Saddam, at the end of the war, all Palestinians were expelled from Kuwait. So all 400,000. The war occurred in the summer, so a lot of Palestinians had been on their summer holidays, about 200,000. So they just were not allowed to come back, and the other 200,000 were kicked out of the country. And so this is a huge trauma, both for Kuwait, which they had grown up with Palestinians, Kuwaitis working shoulder to shoulder to build this country, and also to the Palestinians who returned to either to Palestine or to Jordan or to other countries, and all of those. All that money that was coming from their wages back to their families in Palestine evaporated, and it created a real economic ripple effect throughout the Persian, throughout the Mediterranean, throughout the other countries where the other Arab countries of North Africa and the Levant. And one could argue it might have been one of the contributing factors to the Arab Spring, to the economic dislocations of the Arab Spring. And they were replaced with, as you mentioned before, Southeast Asians. So Bangladeshis, Indians, Sri Lankans, Thais, Filipinos, and also other Arabs, Egyptians and Syrians and Lebanese. So, so why do Kuwaitis, why do they not work in the private sector? Well, about 70% work in the government sector. The government pays a lot more. It has much better pensions. One of my students, when their father died, the family was their father worked in the private sector. Their family was very critical. They said, "See, your father died, and now the pension that you're getting is a fraction of what he would have gotten if he'd worked in the government sector. Work in the government sector. That's where you're going to get the best benefits." So this is
let me just stop you there. That's not unique to Kuwait. That's common to a lot of Gulf countries, and indeed common to a lot of former colonies. If you work for the government in India, especially whether you're a peon or whether you're part of the top bureaucracy, the Indian Administrative Service, you're very well taken care of. So that is not just unique to Kuwait.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, correct. This is not just a Kuwaiti problem. It's just that Kuwait's the only country I have experience with firsthand, and what's coming up is also unique to Kuwait. So we're getting to the point we'll be talking about the problems that the system has created for Kuwait. So these financial flows from the government essentially is taking all them. Let's talk about what Kuwait has done right. Unlike, say, Nigeria, where the people at the top take most of the oil money and keep it for
themselves. They just steal it. They steal it. And they put it in London, maybe Paris, elsewhere.
Bank accounts.
Yeah, exactly. It's a jolly good gig.
Kuwait has done, I think, the right thing in that they've taken the oil money and they've split it up amidst all their citizens, and they've used it to build desalination plants and roads and an education system of schools and universities, a healthcare system, all things that they really didn't. There was one hospital in Kuwait, but before oil, and now there's many hospitals. The mortality rate, infant mortality has gone down. The age of death,
life expectancy
has gone up. Yeah. So people are much better taken care of than they were before. So this has been called citizenship rents by researchers Melissa Langworthy and Charles Danreuther. And they divide Kuwait into three classes. So about half of Kuwait, the Kuwaiti population, they're called Hadar. These are town dwellers. These are the descendants of the pre-oil townspeople. Kuwait comes from Al-Qut. The word Kuwait comes from Al-Qut, the little fort. And originally there was this little mud brick adobe fort right on the edge of the Gulf. And the people who lived in there, they call themselves Al-Sur, the people from within the wall. That's how they still think of themselves. Those are the original families of Kuwait. And another half so that's one half of the Kuwaiti citizen population. The other half are Badu, or Bedouins. And they're nomadic desert tribes people. So they're camel herders, and they're nomads. And they settled in Kuwait from about 1950 to the 1980s. And they're, like I said, referred to Badu. They're referred to in English as Bedouin. Some of the Hadar, the townspeople, refer to them as Ajnabi, as foreigners, because they tend to be, whereas the Hadar tend to be more progressive, more liberal, more open-minded. The Badu tend to be more conservative. They want to impose their ideas of Sharia law on Kuwait, and that women should be required to wear the abaya and the hijab, that there should be the death penalty for criticism of the Prophet or his family, and so on. Whereas
they're very
Hadar,
similar to the Saudis in that sense, the Wahhabi tradition.
Yeah, well, they most of them migrated from Saudi Arabia. Some of them migrated from Iraq, but most of them came from Saudi Arabia. And they were invited there by the emir at that time to counterbalance the political influence of the Hadar, the merchant class, who were quite critical of the emir and his policies. And so the emir at the time thought, well, if I bring in all of these citizens, these other citizens, they'll be quite grateful to me for giving them citizenship, and they'll do it. They'll be pliable and they'll do as I say. It hasn't worked out that way.
When did the emir, or then emir, get this wonderfully brilliant idea?
This is like around 1965 when this started happening. So Kuwait became an independent country in 1960, and so that's when people had to start making the decision of do I want to be a citizen, or do I not want to be a citizen? Some of the Badu did not want to be citizen, and they became what are called Baduns, stateless people. There are it's between 100 and 300,000 stateless Badun. So they have no legal status in Kuwait. Now a lot of them have decided that was a bad idea, and they're trying to become some citizen. But up until the 80s, for example, almost 80% of the Kuwaiti army was Badun, and there were other really essential functions that they fulfilled.
Was that a pathway to citizenship if they joined the army?
It was one possible pathway to citizenship, but really that really wasn't the issue at the time, because citizenship, it was the benefits were not that obvious. They were still figuring out the system which we've described you. That was still being developed at the time, and they were, like I said, they're nomadic tribes people, and they were used to flowing back and forth between the borders of Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Kuwait. All that is hardened now, and it's become much more difficult. So they're just kind of stuck as stateless people within Kuwait. So they do work, but they have no legal rights. In fact, one former minister of the interior in Kuwait said a Badun's name is written in pencil. It is easily erased. So they're in a very precarious position. They're very similar to undocumented migrants in the United States who work, in them picking crops and working in meat packing plants and so on, where they're very easily exploited by their employers.
So they work very hard for very little pay and keep the Kuwaiti economy humming.
Yeah, so they along with the legal migrants. So you have the legal migrants coming from South and Southeast Asia, who are, they're in a difficult position, but the Baduns are even in a more difficult position. So the problem with this system is it's become increasingly unsustainable as oil prices have fluctuated and dropped close to or below the cost of extraction, what they call the break-even point. And so when oil prices were high, this worked very well. But as like the United States has increased its oil production, and other countries have brought more oil online, that has lowered oil prices, and so it's made it. As the Kuwait government is looking forward, they're thinking that we can't keep doing this. So when I was living in Kuwait from 2011 to 2016, they thought, okay, this is what we need to do. We need to get rid of some of these migrant workers, and we need to have Kuwaitis doing their jobs and not getting all these not taking government salaries, and that will reduce how much the government expenditures. And so about anywhere from 10 to 15,000 expats at that time were being expelled per year. I believe that number has gone up to about 30,000 per year now, about 1.5% of the expats. But it really hasn't changed things, because a lot of the jobs that expats do, Kuwaitis don't want to do. They don't want to do low status jobs like a school teacher, like I was. That's not a job that most Kuwaitis would be interested in doing.
Wow, a school teacher's job is considered low status. Wow.
Low status, yeah, low status. A university professor, yeah, that's fine. That's high status. But I was working in a secondary school, so that was considered. And certainly none of the jobs like working in retail or being a personal trainer, or certainly not sweeping streets or working in construction. So mostly what this has done is raise the cost of labor, because there's fewer laborers because they've been kicked out of the country. So my friends who worked in construction complain that the workers that are left can demand more money because there's fewer of them around.
Demand and supply, the oldest law of economics.
Yeah. So starting in 2024, the government turned to a new way of reducing expenditure. A new emir, the old emir, passed away. His half brother, Sheikh Mishal, came in, and he started a new program of stripping Kuwaitis of their citizenship to reduce the number of citizens, to shrink the pool of citizens who can draw on state welfare funds and services. So if you have a multiple passport, if you have Kuwaiti citizenship, you're not supposed to have multiple passports. But one of the things that a lot of my students would do is when their parents were students, they would get Kuwaitis very generous education scholarship, and they would go to the United States. They'd go to Boston University or Northeastern University, and they would get their undergraduate and graduate degrees, and they'd have all their kids, and so that would mean all their children would have American passports, and then they would move back to Kuwait and they would get their government job. This was sort of like the plan B in case things went bad in Kuwait. So now anybody who has an American passport, you lose your Kuwaiti citizenship, so that's kind of backfired. Or you have to very quickly renounce your American citizenship so that you keep your Kuwaiti passport. If you're a foreign woman, so you were mentioning today, people might want to marry a Kuwaiti. If you're a foreign woman, an ajnabi, a foreigner, and you marry a Kuwaiti man, it used to be that you would automatically get Kuwaiti citizenship. And your children would get Kuwaiti citizenship. So now all those foreign women have lost their Kuwaiti citizenship.
And what about their children? What about their children?
Well, since their children have a Kuwaiti father, they keep their citizenship. But if you did the right thing, as you were supposed to do, and you renounced your, say, American or British or whatever citizenship, and kept your Kuwaiti citizenship, and so that you could get your Kuwaiti citizenship, you are now effectively been turned into a badoon. You're stateless. You no longer have Kuwaiti citizenship. You don't have your old citizenship. You no longer have access to Kuwaiti benefits. You no longer have access to you can't get a job legally. So you're effectively indigent. So that's been so. And then
you're completely dependent on your husband if you're a woman.
If they're alive. So this is, but if there are widows who have been put in this situation. Their husband was a Kuwaiti citizen. Kuwaiti, they married. For many years, it was very fashionable in Kuwait to marry Syrians. Syrians are for their beauty and their lighter skin they were considered to be very
What about
excellent wives.
Lebanese?
And Lebanese, but mostly Syrians.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of Kuwaitis of like, say, my generation who very proudly would say that they're Syrian Kuwaiti. Now it's much more. It's considered better to say that you're full Kuwaiti, that both your mother and your father are full Kuwaiti citizens. This is part of this sort of Kuwaiti nationalist campaign that's been going on. So in addition to people who just through no fault of their own have now lost their citizenship, they did things the way under the old rules, and under the new rules they've lost their citizenship. There has been fraud. Okay. So on January 23rd, 2026, the Arab Times reported that Kuwait's Nationality Investigation Department discovered that one man, who's now dead, who claimed to have been born in Kuwait in the 30s and registered for citizenship in 1965, was married to 6 wives and had 44 children. DNA testing proved that some of the children were biologically related, but some were not. And others were added under different fraudulent claims. So in all, 928 individuals were stripped of their citizenship. There have also been found many large Kuwaiti families have been found to be biologically unrelated, not Kuwaiti, but Syrian, some of whom have very sensitive positions in the Kuwaiti government. So they have lost their citizenship as well.
Oh dear.
So as one American observer put it, in the U.S. we use DNA testing to know who your daddy is. In Kuwait, we use it to prove who your daddy isn't.
Ooh la la! This is grim news for a lot of Kuwaitis. I mean, we laugh.
Yeah.
But the results must be catastrophic for so many.
About 60,000, between 50 and 60,000 thus far, and the campaign is not over. So it means revoked identification, loss of legal job status, frozen bank accounts, looming threat of permanent statelessness. While these changes they've triggered an outcry within Kuwait, the international community has pretty much been largely silent. The Kuwaiti government
too busy
actions,
with Gaza and others and Ukraine and now, of course, Greenland and Venezuela.
Yeah. So it reflects, according to Boston University School of Law, this reflects a growing regional trend of weaponizing citizenship revocation as a tool of control, exclusion, and gendered injustice. So one of the reasons that parents chose to send their children to the international school where I taught from 2011 to 2016, the American International School Kuwait, was so they could get a rigorous academic education and be able to secure a place at a foreign university, and if they wanted to get a job outside Kuwait, so that they wouldn't be de-skilled. The way children who are within the Kuwait national system are. So the school used the International Baccalaureate Educational Framework, which relies, the IB, crucially relies on external examinations. So that insulates the school from bribery and corruption that plagues Kuwaiti education. 2 years ago, 400 students and several members of the government were found. There was a big scandal where the students had bought exam questions from government officials. Some of them had special earpieces so they could get exam questions, and they've effectively have outsourced their education. Some teachers who worked as tutors after school, they were doing homework for students, and in one case there was one teacher that I knew was writing the dissertation for a Kuwaiti school principal. The students who went to my school did not have that problem. They went off and they got an excellent education. They've done well overseas, and many of them have stayed overseas working over there. But the owners of the school, who were descended from a Lebanese doctor who saved the life of the emir and was granted Kuwaiti citizenship, they've all been stripped of their citizenship.
Wow.
They can continue running the school, but not as Kuwaitis, and they'll probably have to bring on a Kuwaiti silent partner.
So are they going to live on in Kuwait, or are they going to leave
They'll
for,
they'll
let's
probably
say,
they'll stay on
Dubai?
running the school and
Got
with a
it.
Kuwaiti silent partner.
Got it.
So so the problem which you have in Kuwait, and this is where we're getting back to the problem with UBI, after 3 generations of living on the government, on this sort of this UBI system, with migrants performing most of the physical and cognitive labor, Kuwaitis have been deskilled. So some of the students, when I they're really unsuited to competition in the marketplace. So and nor does the citizenship revocation campaign address the problem of meaning. If the purpose of education is to prepare us for work, but we no longer have to, what's the point of education? How does a human being create a meaningful life? Now,
it's a fundamental philosophical question. You could argue that maybe all education people need is making Instagram reels, like India's railway minister, who's known as Reel Mantri.
Well, or look at Aristotle and Plato and Socrates.
Well, that's
the academy.
That's the high philosophy version. You reveal your elitism, sir.
In practice, a minority of Kuwaitis do these things. Most Kuwaitis don't. They spend their days eating out, shopping, and playing. And there's a problem with chronic diseases like diabetes and cancer have climbed. Young men engage in daring road games like jet ski chicken and sidewalk skiing, often resulting in spectacular crashes. Personal debts exploded, forcing the emir to forgive all credit card debt from time to time. In times of social instability.
Hold fire. When he forgives credit card debt, does that mean that the Kuwaiti government
just for citizens
picks up
the tab for everyone's credit card debt?
Wow.
And in times of social instability, Kuwaitis are given a year of free food to kind of tamp down social unrest. But that doesn't really address the problem of it, that this revocation campaign, it may indeed shrink the government. The problem with the government, balance of payments.
So let me stop you. Why is this such a big impetus towards reducing government expenditure and fundamentally stripping people away from citizenship? Is it because now the expenses are a touch too high and oil money is not covering
Kuwait,
the expenses?
Exactly. Yeah. Kuwait. Now Kuwait has invested trillions in a futures fund for exactly like a rainy day fund for exactly this, but it's not bottomless, and they've been dipping into this from time to time. And they've made lots of foreign investments, so it's not an immediate problem, but they can't keep living this way forever. So they've tried to get Kuwaitis to work in non-government jobs, and now they're reducing the number of Kuwaitis so that they can balance. But this is also changing the nature of Kuwaiti citizenship, because the people that are losing their citizenship are not the Hadar, not the original people, the Al-Sur, the people from inside the wall. It's the Badu. It's the desert Bedouins who were invited to come to Kuwait, as well as the foreign wives and so on. So this is changing the balance of power in the National Assembly, so that a lot of these projects that have been that progressives in Kuwait have wanted to do, a new port, improve roads, a metro, which has been on the books since the 70s and has never been built.
Wow, 50 years in the waiting.
More glittering skyscrapers like they're seeing popping up in the Emirates, which are not popping up in Kuwait. All that stuff has been held at a standstill because of this gridlock. This will break the gridlock. So it's twofold. Is to both reduce expenses and to make the government more efficient. And one could see.
So do they want to make Kuwait into a rival to, say, Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Qatar?
According to yes. Yeah. Because originally it was back in the 70s and 80s, Kuwait was the place that everybody looked to as this is before oil had started being exploited in the other Emirates, and Kuwait was way ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
Andy Warhol had a exhibition there. Christo was considering draping the Kuwait towers in one of his amazing draping art projects. Kuwaitis were they were dancing in discotheques in go-go boots and mini skirts. It was a very, very progressive, very progressive country. Up until 1962, alcohol was openly sold in Kuwait, and all of that changed with this change in the population. So
when the Emir brought in the Bedu from
the Badu
from Saudi Arabia,
the Bedouins, that changed and so he has said that he wants Kuwait to become more moderate, more progressive, more outward looking, and to become more like I think the Emirates, as far as like a destination for tourism, a financial center, and he thinks this will help do it, and
So
there we are.
There you go. So here we are. So the upshot of what you're saying is that if you bring in UBI, you have a lot of unintended consequences. And Kuwait, despite its oil wealth, demonstrates the unintended consequences: an unskilled population, then a restriction of citizenship, incentives for fraud, etc., etc.
That's what I'm arguing.
Brilliant. All right, Bryn, we've gone on for well over an hour. I hope viewers have enjoyed it as much as I have. We'll have you back to discuss yet another issue. Always a pleasure and a privilege to have you on Fair Observer's YouTube channel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.